Hare Krishna. We have different audiences, 4 different audiences, and not all the audiences were together this past Sunday. And this Sunday is a continuation of past Sunday. So for those of you that weren't with us last Sunday, I wasn't either. A summary overview of Canto 1, Chapter 1 was the topic from last Sunday. And we're moving on to Chapter 2 of Canto 1, Srimad Bhagavatam. So for those of you that are a little new to Srimad Bhagavatam, and even just as a refresher for those of you that are familiar, let's do a little background, setting the scene. Srimad Bhagavatam appeared shortly after Krishna's departure from this world. When Krishna departed from this world, shortly after, the Pandavas departed. And before the Pandavas departed, the grandson of the Pandavas, namely Maharaj Parikshit, was installed as the king, the successor to the throne. And then the Pandavas departed, and then Maharaj Parikshit became king. And as will be narrated in the course of Canto 1, some very unfortunate event took place during the rule of Maharaj Parikshit. That is, he was cursed to die. And the events that follow his cursing to die result in the manifesting of Srimad Bhagavatam by Maharaj Parikshit hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadeva Goswami. And in the audience of the many assembled sages that heard Shukadeva Goswami speak Srimad Bhagavatam for the first time, Sutta Goswami was there. Sutta Goswami was in the audience, and he heard Srimad Bhagavatam. So he's the primary speaker in Canto 1. So the scene of Canto 1, Chapter 1 opens first with Mangala Charana, the presentation of auspiciousness, Mangala Charana. And in those 3 verses, very profound foundational statements of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam's teaching are presented. One can say the entire Srimad Bhagavatam is summarized in those 3 verses. One can say like that. And after those introductory verses, the scene then opens with the sages, because after Krishna departed, shortly thereafter, Kali Yuga began. There's a sandhi, a short interval of time, a transition time between the previous yuga and the present yuga. And then Kali Yuga began. And the sages who were present at that time, they knew what that meant. It's bad news. That's what it meant. And so they wanted to do something. Sages by nature are wanting to utilize their body, mind, and words in the service and upliftment of all living beings. So they decided collectively that they would do what they knew how to do, which was perform a religious sacrifice at the sacred place of Kurukshetra and conduct a sacrifice that would continue one sacrifice after the next, after the next, after the next, continuing for 1,000 years. And as they were preparing and commencing, something very wonderful happened. Sutta Goswami appeared on the scene. And they all recognized Sutta Goswami as a qualified speaker. So this is chapter 1. They expressed their appreciation of Sutta Goswami's qualification, and they then presented a set of questions for Sutta Goswami to speak about and to answer, to respond to. And that closes chapter 1. And chapter 2 begins with answering the first 4 of the 6 questions. Now, how do we know, because we're regular folks, we know from the great acharyas which verses are the 6 questions. Jiva Goswami in particular, for those of you that are new, that are in the listening audience, Jiva Goswami, as one of the most esteemed members of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. The 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, some of you may not be familiar with. They are principal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, who appeared in the mood of the devotee of Krishna, in the mood of Radharani, to teach about how to give your life to Krishna. Sarvadharmam parityajamam ekam sharanam vraja. Krishna himself came to teach how to live your life according to that Bhagavad Gita essence verse. How mam ekam sharanam, how to surrender exclusively to Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach that, how to do that. And he did by his behavior and then his teachings he gave to his followers. And one of the principal of those followers was Jiva Goswami, who then very kindly has indicated in his writings, these verses in chapter 1, these are the 6 questions. These verses in chapter 2 are the answers to those questions, and we're going to be covering 4 of the 6, and then next week comes Canto 1, Chapter 3. 2 more questions are addressed in Chapter 3. So I hope you get the picture. Hope nobody's confused out there. 6 questions, 6 answers. And Chapter 2 lays out what are 6 of the answers, and we'll be also indicating what are the questions that those answers are responding to. So that's all a background, and now we're ready to begin Chapter 2. That's this evening's discussion. Chapter 2 is called Divinity and Divine Service. There's the object of love, and there's the abode of love, the person that's carrying within love for the object. Krishna is the object, that's divinity. And the person who's carrying love for that object, they're carrying the mood of devotional service. So divinity and divine service. That's chapter 2. There's 34 verses in Canto 1, Chapter 2. So we'll just be summarizing what those verses are, and hopefully you'll feel inspired to go open up your Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, and start reading. So the first 5 verses are Sutta Goswami doing what sages do before they speak, commonly. He offers various prayers to the personality of Godhead, to exalted devotees, to those who have made his life auspicious, and now before he speaks, he's offering his appreciation, praise, and gratitude to them before he begins speaking. So that's verses 1 through 5 of chapter 2. And now we're ready for verse number 6, 1 to 6 of the second canto, or first canto, chapter 2. So this is addressing one of the 6 questions. Those of you that like to take notes, you can take notes. And those of you that don't like to take notes, I can circulate this summary to the audience so you can have it in your notes and you can take a look at it later. In chapter 1, the very first question that the sages are asking Sutta Goswami is, what's the ultimate good for all people? That's a good place to start. The ultimate good for all people. And they say, in this age of Kali, things are topsy-turvy. The Sanskrit phrase, manda samanda batayo manda bhagya hupadruta. It's manda means bad. And manda says it's bad and super bad. The quality of the life of people in this age of Kali is bad and becoming more so, worse. And people are not going to take the time and the trouble, nor do they have the inclination, nor do they have teachers, and it's a unfortunate age. So can you do this? Can you summarize for us what's the ultimate goal for all people in this age of Kali? Really good question. And chapter 2, verse number 6 gives the answer. Here's the translation of the answer, then I'll say the Sanskrit. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Read it again. The supreme occupation or dharma of all humanity is that by which one can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So the ultimate good is to do that which will bring you to the position of loving devotional service. Whatever that is, whatever fits under that heading, that's the ultimate good. Performing your occupation in such a way that it brings you to devotional service to the transcendent Lord. Connecting your work to God. And not just to God, but to loving service to God. And that activity, the work that you do, that's in the mood of loving service to God, should not be with motivation. And it shouldn't be sometimes, it should be uninterrupted. If it's going to end up where the Atma, the self, is satisfied, ye natma suprasidati. So those of you that are familiar with Bhagavatam, you know the verse. So I'll say, and if you know, you can say it out loud. Of course, you're just in your home, wherever you are, because that's what we're doing these days. Savai pung sang paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhoksaje ahaitaki apratyata yayatma suprasidati. An often quoted verse is paradharma, which is spoken of in the first verses of Canto 1, Chapter 1. Paradharma is the ultimate dharma, paradharma, or supreme occupation, and that which leads to bhaktir adhoksaja. Adhoksaja is the name of the transcendent Lord. Adhoksaja literally means one who's beyond the senses. So it's interesting. You're supposed to, it's recommended, use your senses to serve He who's beyond the senses. That requires faith. And then there's a whole topic of how such faith is kindled. But that's more to coming attractions in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's speaking a principle which is later expanded in the whole rest of the Bhagavatam. So one can say these 6 questions and these 6 answers, that's the essence of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And if you can understand those questions, those answers, you've understood the Bhagavatam. At least the principles that are the basis and support of the Bhagavatam. So let's say it again. It's an important question. What's the ultimate good for all people? It's whatever it is that results in attaining loving devotional service to the transcendent Lord. That's the ultimate good. And that service is to be uninterrupted and unmotivated. Otherwise, we're not going to feel satisfied. But if you want full satisfaction, that's how. That's the ultimate good for all people. And then the next question. So that was the question. Those of you who like to take notes, is 119 Bhagavatam. And 1111 Bhagavatam asks, what's the essence of all scriptures? Very similar question. People are lazy, misguided, unfortunate, disturbed. The Vedas are really vast, and who's going to take the time, and who will understand if they take the time, and they'll be misguided anyway. So can you do something really helpful? Can you just state what's the essence of all the Vedas, please? Concisely, of course. Thank you very much. It's 1111 question. And the answer is, again, by devotional service, by rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Jnana and Vairagya are coveted, valued, and they have high esteem within the Vedas. But one doesn't need to independently go after knowledge and detachment. One goes after causeless devotional service. On haituki apratyata, unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service. You do that, knowledge and detachment are yours. How does that happen? Krishna gives it. That's how it happens. When he sees unmotivated and uninterrupted service, he loads up your hard drive. He transfers, he imparts all knowledge and detachment, jnana and vairagya. So what's the essence of all scriptures? Devotional service that's rendered like that unto the personality of Godhead, that's the essence of scriptures. Do that. And when one does that, knowledge and detachment causelessly follow. One doesn't need to make separate endeavor for knowledge and detachment. Just do that one thing, and the other things are accomplished. Means you don't have to go to school, right? No, that's not what it means. Because this knowledge and detachment has to do with transcendence. And then, school has to do with, other things, dealing with affairs of the material world. But what's more important is the knowledge of transcendence, because when knowledge of transcendence is there, then behind whatever you may know about dealing with matter or dealing with affairs of the material world, you're a responsible and conscious entity. You're a person with character. And then when somebody gives a person with character knowledge of things in this world, they're going to use it in a character way. So that's a good person to train up, is one who has character. Say it the other way. One who doesn't have character, give them knowledge of how to do things, whoa, they start to become a dangerous person in this world, because they can do dangerous things because they have no character. They have no moral compass. They have no sensibility of how to deploy what they now know about how things work in this world. So they can blow up things, they can exploit things, they can do whatever they want to do, and they have no accountability, responsibility, and morality and value system other than get more, learn more, grab more, own more, and defeat more people because I want to get more. Look out, here I come. That's material life that has no core. So the scriptures, the essence of all scriptures is to teach one Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitukam. So that was text 7 from chapter 2. And there's only 34 chapters, 34 verses, so we're well along our way. We're a quarter of the way done through our subject for this evening, the number of verses in chapter 2. But we've touched on 2 of the 6 questions. What's the ultimate good of all people, and what's the essence of all scriptures? And then texts 8 through 15 says, when you do that devotional service, there's only one thing to be gained by that devotional service, and that's more devotional service, or a purer state of consciousness in devotional service, which means there's plenty of statements that says don't do for some other reason. It's expanding on something that was stated in the answer to question number 1. Ahaitukiya pratyata, devotional service that's uninterrupted and unmotivated. So what's devotional service that's motivated? Well, I want something. That's what motivation is. So, for example, in this section, 8 through 15, there's a celebrated verse. Dharmasya hi apavargasya nartotayo pakalpate. You shouldn't engage in your prescribed duty for any other reason than ultimate liberation, and it should not be done for the purpose of material gain. The next says, and if some material gain comes, you don't use that material gain for sense gratification. You use that material gain in service to Krishna. That's the standard of modifying what was described above, this ultimate good for all living beings. So devotional service is meant to render more devotional service. Like Prabhupada would say sometimes, what's the goal of chanting? And he would say, it's more chanting. To come to the stage where it's purity, and when there's purity, you do what people who are pure do. You sing the glories of the Supreme Lord. It's the opportunity to be engaged eternally in one's natural occupation, which is service to the Supreme Lord. Only loving service is to be sought after ultimately in the performance of one's work or prescribed duty. So we're almost halfway through the chapter. That was really fast. Now comes the next set of verses, the very celebrated set of verses. They're 16 through 21. And those of you that like to read Bhagavad Gita, you can look up these verses later in your Bhagavad Gita. It's found in chapter 7, text number 2 of Bhagavad Gita, starting with text 16 going through 21. Right in the purport, Prabhupada lists them, just gives the list and then the translation. And there's another place where they appear, one after the next, and that is this Markine Bhagavat Dharma. What that is when Prabhupada arrived in the Boston harbor, and he looked over the ship into the harbor and saw what he saw, the city of Boston and the life of Americans, he was holding his head saying, mission impossible. How are these people going to understand a message of transcendence? And they're so immersed in the modes of passion and ignorance. He saw it. And it's not possible they'll understand. But so how it is that persons that are deeply influenced by the modes of nature, how are they to understand transcendence? That's what's in these verses. And those of you that like to read Prabhupada's books, you're familiar with who Rupa Goswami is. And for those of you that are newer and don't know who Rupa Goswami is, he's one of those 6 Goswamis. We mentioned before Lord Chaitanya taught how to engage in the process of surrender to Krishna, as he describes in Bhagavad Gita. And chief associates were the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, and Rupa Goswami, whose name I just mentioned, he's one of those 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. On altars in homes and all of our temples, you'll see a little picture that has those 6. And Rupa is right in the center. Rupa Goswami. So he took these verses, 16 through 21, along with other passages from the Vedas, and distilled it down into little statements of the sequential stages of bhakti, how bhakti unfolds. From its seed, bhakti lata bija, from the very seed of devotion to the mature stage of devotion. And these verses cover that. So I'm just going to read them, and they're packed with spiritual understanding. Look at, here's the bookmark, Divinity and Divine Service. Okay, text 16. Oh, twice-born sages, this is Sutta speaking to the Brahmanas in Naimisharanya. I think I said Kurukshetra, but it's Naimisharanya. Yeah. By serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service one gains affinity for hearing the message of Vasudeva. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. This is Srinvatasva Kata Krishna. Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, or Super Soul, in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. So I don't know if I'm going to go through all these. That's text 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 4 more. Very famous verses. Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu says that the cleansing brings one to the stage of nishtha, steadiness in bhakti. So in the beginning, a little faith. With that little faith, hearing or association with saintly persons, sadhu sangha. And in the association of sadhus, the third stage is you do with sadhus what sadhus do. You hear topics about Krishna, bhajana kriya. And hearing those topics about Krishna and the association of sadhus with faith, that faith becomes uplifted and nourished, and the impure things within the heart become reduced. That's this nashta prayeshu abhadreshu. Abhadra means inauspicious things. Bhadra means auspicious. And then there's subhadra, very auspicious. And there's abhadra, inauspicious. The inauspicious things, abhadras, within the heart become cleansed. Nashta, cleansed, cleared. House cleaning. It's springtime. But it happens any season of the year. Just hear and chant the topics of Krishna in association with sadhu-like people, and this cleansing goes on. And when that cleansing progresses, it matures, then the stage of steadiness that's described right in the verse. Naishtaki, similar root, verbal root as nishtha, steady. And then what happens when that steadiness comes? As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of ignorance and passion. Remember Prabhupada in the Boston Harbor looking out and going, mission impossible. How are these people going to understand pure goodness when they're so much influenced by ignorance and passion? And he's giving the answer. Well, Sutta's giving the answer. And that's by hearing topics of Krishna. Ignorance and passion subside. Whew, what a relief. Ignorance and passion subside. And then irrevocable loving service does that cleansing effect, and the devotee thus becomes more established in goodness, and then a certain kind of happiness in goodness becomes experienced by them. Happiness, according to Bhagavad Gita, it's very much influenced by the modes of nature. Everything is influenced in material and conditional life by the modes of nature. So the happiness in the mode of goodness becomes your experience. It's steadily. I mean, some fluctuation in the not yet matured stage, but it becomes more a condition of happiness. Just like, for example, one of the characteristics of goodness is cleanliness. You've heard this before? Cleanliness is next to godliness. You've heard that one? So that's your mom and dad may say, clean your room, right? Because cleanliness is next to godliness. You got to be in your room. You got to have godliness. Clean your room. So, there's a certain kind of happiness that comes with cleanliness. One of the questions that came in the Saturday class, we had a Saturday class with kind of beginner people, and one of the questions had to do with, I like to keep my house clean. And, then I also like to chant, but, I never get to that stage. It's hard to get to the stage where my house is clean, and then I can do more chanting. Anyway, but that mode of goodness quality, that's a good quality. Some people need to really work at just becoming clean, and some people just like being clean. That's a mode of goodness happiness. Or there's other kinds of mode of goodness happiness, like compassion. In the modern time, that the people that language being used these days is people are on the front line. The hospital workers that are helping with the coronavirus people, they're being celebrated. And not even the people that are in the front line. This, how do you pronounce his name? Fauci? Fauci or Fauci? Fauci. So he's becoming a hero because Dr. Fauci, COVID person, that's been through epidemics and pandemics, and he knows what's good for people. So he's celebrated. He's not in the hospital and wearing all the equipment, but he's helping people. So people that are doing that kind of service, they're becoming like heroes. Like in a battle, the people that go to battle for the citizens. So they're going to battle for all of us. I mean, we're okay, but part of we're okay is they're taking care of people that aren't okay, and they're heroes. And there's a happiness with being a mode of goodness hero, and some mode of goodness heroes may die doing that mode of goodness service. But anyway, the verse is speaking of, in all circumstances, not just epidemic circumstances, but all circumstances, a kind of inner happiness that otherwise isn't going to be accessed, especially in this age of Kali, is made possible just by this one activity. That one activity, once again, is hearing topics of Krishna and having an attraction to hear the topics of Krishna, at least eventually, so that the cleansing goes on, the modes of nature start to subside a bit, devotional service becomes gradually established as irrevocable fact. It's unstoppable. So steadiness of devotional service has become awakened, and this happiness has become awakened. And then there are just two more verses in this section. Thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation. That was pretty quick, but it's just describing, stops on the train to get to the final station. So, positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead, not just notional. Like, yeah, I believe in God. That's good. And then what about direct scientific knowledge and realization? That's called, there's jnana and there's vijnana. Complete knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. Still in the world, but not part of the world anymore. And then the final, text 21, Vidyante hridaya grantis, the knot of the heart is pierced. No, it's a metaphor. You don't literally pierce your heart. But it's a metaphor of the knot of the heart, hridaya grantis. That's this false ego, that which binds, that's the knot. It binds the soul to matter. That's false ego. False, you say it the other way. False ego binds the soul to matter. And the false ego is cut. Chidyante, like a sword, cuts a knot. So this powerful knowledge of transcendence cuts the knot. It dissolves false ego. Finished. Not just like pinned to the ground, but finished. Finished. No more false ego. The chain of fruitive action is terminated when one sees the self as master, and the is this self with a small s. That is to say, conditioned life is over. Conditioned life is over can mean the negative, but it's more than negative. It's the positive. That is to say, liberation, the idea of liberation, commonly, not everybody, but commonly, people think of liberation as I'm out of jail. The constraints and confinements of conditioned life are over, or in Buddhism is called nirvana. I mean, it's a Sanskrit term. It's a Vedic term. It means cessation. Nirvana means cessation of material existence. So then comes the question, okay, now what do you do? Nothing. Well, do I even exist? No, you don't even exist. Your material existence is over. So what's my spiritual existence? Nothing. That's a straight jacket in a padded cell and you're bound and gagged. Your material existence is over. I don't know if that doesn't sound very inviting. So what am I supposed to do in that liberated stage? That's what this verse is pointing to. The Bhagavatam later, boys, the Bhagavatam later speaks of what liberation is. The Bhagavatam conception of liberation is in your spiritual form, not the material, not this physical body, but the spiritual form, you engage in spiritual activities with your spiritual form in service to the supreme form, to Krishna. That's what is described here. The self is the master. It means it's unpacking that phrase, the self is the master. The supreme person is the master. And in my spiritual form, I engage in varieties of service to the supreme master. That's the conclusion of text 31 or 21. So the Bhagavatam expands on that series of verses. Bhagavad Gita does also. And so it's a prelude. If one can understand these essential verses of chapter 2, it's worth reading again and again and again and again. Like anything that you really want to deeply understand, read it again and again, and it starts to go inside. This is what happens subjectively. It's inside, and you start to see the world differently because you have another lens to look through than the material lens. And you can see what you couldn't see before. It's there, but you couldn't see it before because the lens you were looking through was kind of distorted. Okay, so that's through 21. The next set of verses 22 through 25 speaks of different categories of worship. And it first starts of speaking worship of Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. So there's some younger people sitting here. You know who is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And it speaks about that. There are those that worship those three personalities. And then the next two verses speak of persons that worship demigods. And there's a lot of demigods, according to the Vedic texts. You know how many demigods there are? There's 33 million demigods. There's a lot of personalities that they have control departments of the universe. That's what demigods do. They look after things within the universe. They're controllers of different details in the universe. Just like, this city. This isn't a big city, but it has the highway department, the water department, the electric department, the Department of Interior, the Department of all kinds of things. So to look after what goes on in the city. So what to speak of a universe? There's controlling personalities within the universe. So it speaks of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva worship, demigod worship, and then there's two verses that speak the best of all worship is worship of Vasudeva. And Vasudeva means Krishna, because Vasudeva is the name of the son of Vasudeva. Pay attention. Hello. Vasudeva means the son of Vasudeva. Vasudeva is the father. The son's name is Vasudeva, Krishna. So worship of Krishna is the best. This is Sutta speaking. We're still in chapter 2. And then comes the concluding verses. And we're done. So in those concluding verses, that's texts number 30 through 34. There's 2 more questions and 2 more answers out of the 6 questions and answers. So the first 2 questions, just as a reminder, what's the all-around good best thing for all living people, for all living entities, for all people, the ultimate good for all people, and what's the essence of the message of the scriptures? Those are the first 2 questions. The next 2 questions, the answers are, it's not in sequence. So question number 3 is found in the very last verse of the chapter. The question is, when Krishna appears, this Vasudeva personality, the Supreme Person, when he appears in this world, what's his purpose? He creates, he maintains and annihilates, he creates those who do all those things. And when he comes himself, what's his purpose? That's a good question. And the answer is, he, Krishna, who maintains all planets inhabited by the demigods, he gives power to the demigods to do what the demigods do. He gives power, he makes the whole show happen. But sometimes he comes himself, or sometimes he sends his expansions within that which he has created. And what is his purpose? That was the question. To reclaim those in the mode of pure goodness. Now, people in this world have ignorance, passion, and goodness, mixed modes. Now, the earlier verse is saying how to get people from mixed modes to pure goodness. And so he comes to bring them back to the spiritual world. That's his purpose. That's the statement of Sutta Goswami, text 34. And then, of course, the rest of the Bhagavatam gives different incarnations and how they do the same thing. And then ultimately Krishna, Vasudeva Krishna, comes and does the same thing. We've been discussing this. in our morning and evening classes. The morning we're discussing the Govardhan Leela, and the evening we just finished, but we were discussing Brahma Vimohan Leela, the pastime of Lord Brahma becoming bewildered when he took the calves and the cowherd boys. So there's a purpose, and it's to give us subject matter to hear and chant, to attract our hearts to come to be with Krishna, because he's such a loving personality. And then the other question that's answered here is question number 4. It's specific to the pastimes. The other question is the purpose. Now comes the pastimes. Please describe the pastimes of the Lord. It says especially in his Vishnu forms, that is, the forms of Vishnu that bring about creation. So, for the audience that's not familiar with this, there's the original source of everything, according to the Bhagavatam, that's Krishna. And Krishna expands himself, sometimes as likenesses of himself, or sometimes in portions of himself, and one of those portions of himself is for the purpose of material creation. He expands as Vishnu. And there's 3 functions of Vishnu: one who creates the universe, one who enters into the universe and fills up the universe, and one who enters into every atom and controls every atom of the universe. And there's names for each of those Vishnu forms. So the question that's being asked, what adventures does he do in those Vishnu forms? And this section is the answer, starting with text 30. In the beginning of the material creation, that absolute personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, Krishna, in his transcendental position, created the energies of cause and effect. By his own internal energy. So for newer people, that's kind of like rocket science. How do you understand that one? In the spiritual world, there aren't the laws governing activities in this world. Laws governing in this world, there's cause and effect. Like I'm, looking in front of me, there's 3 carpets. And one has a set of colors that are going in rows like this. And this one has another set of colors going in rows like that. And this one is very different. This looks like the heads of matchsticks, but one's green and one's red and one's brown, one's blue. So there's different patterns. And now before there was these patterns, that's the effect. Somebody, a creative somebody, said, hey, let's make a rug that looks like this. And let's make one look like that. And then let's make another one that looks like this other one. Okay, let's go make it. So there's the effect, that's the cause, and then the cause, that's the creative person's. Anyway, there's a whole series of cause and effects and cause and effects and cause and effects. Like, why even have a rug, or why even have a house, or why even have creation, or why have anything? So there's cause and effect in this world. But in the spiritual world, there isn't cause and effect. There's no material principles involved. There's no matter. But in that realm where there's no matter of cause and effect, he, the source of everything, provides the cause and effect of everything that's of this world. And that's where it starts. The potency of cause and effect. And then comes the Vishnus, and then they manipulate the cause and effect principles. You can read those verses. Because of time, I'm not going to, but it's Canto 1, Chapter 2, verses 30 through 33. That's Lord Vishnu and his adventures. in the matters of creation. And then the final verse is 34, which is another one of the principal questions, and that is, why did Vasudeva Krishna, appear in this place that he created? And the answer was given: to reclaim those in pure goodness, to again be with him. Come on, let's go home to the spiritual world. And they say, we're ready. Let's go. And so they go. And then there's the rest of us that get benefit just by hearing of those activities of reclaiming those in pure goodness. They're wonderful activities in association with one another. Krishna and his pure devotees associating and having wonderful exchanges. And it's very, very attractive, so our hearts and minds become similarly attracted and benefited. When I was asked, I'm going to end. When I was asked to do this summary of Chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service, my first response was, it's packed. And you sure you don't want to break it down into pieces and do more on this piece and that piece and the other piece, and then put the pieces together and you got, a real nice picture, like a puzzle pieces. You sure you want to do the whole thing? And then I thought about it and said, well, if that's what you want, then let's do it in such a way that the audience will be inspired to go back and read a little more slowly and take a look at this piece and take a look at that piece and the other piece and see how they fit together, and be inclined to maybe be engaged in a reading group study of Chapter 2, because there's a lot there. So this has just been a teaser, or a trailer to get a picture of what's inside this Chapter 2. Because the whole of the Bhagavatam, or the whole of the bhakti process, is capsulized in Chapter 2. There's a lot there. Really substantial. So I hope you're inspired to go back and read or hear recordings or be engaged in discussions more deeply on Chapter 2. And then next week, Krishna permitting, we can be back again for Chapter 3. Because there's 2 more of the questions and answers. And a very, very, very important verse in Chapter 3, which is the one verse upon which the whole 18,000 verses rests. It's a really cornerstone verse. Stay tuned for next week. Okay, so any discussion on what we've heard together? Oh, look at this up front.
What's the word?
1-3-28.
Okay.
1-3-28. And you know what? Go ahead, say what? I will provide to whoever is sending out invitations to people to attend the class a little summary of the verse. Now, there was some years ago an article in Back to Godhead magazine. You've heard of that one before, right? Back to Godhead magazine? Think so? It's an article just on that verse. So part of what will be sent out is, it's an 8-page, 7-page, whatever it is, several page article on that verse, the importance of that verse, and what it's saying and why it's important and everything. And it's, meant for just congregation folks. It's not meant for scholarly people, just congregation folks to understand what is all that verse about. Why is it so important? What is it saying? And then there's some more technical language that I'll also send out that says, in fact, Vibhu Chaitanya, you already have it, those 2 articles. So he'll see that whoever's on the mail out list can get it. And then St. Louis also can get it. I mentioned this phrase, Pati Bhasya, Bhasa, not Bhashya, Pati Bhasa Sutra. You've heard the word sutra before, right? Like Vedanta Sutra. So sutra means code. It's like really packed up, compressed snowball. And it's like, really tight, really terse, really compact. That's a sutra. And Pati Bhasya, Bhasa means it's the essence. It's a phrase, a sutra, that many disconnected ideas and thoughts and teachings, etc., it harmonizes and synthesizes them all. And it comes at the beginning of a text, commonly, and all the other texts, your understanding of all the other texts of that work must align themselves with that sutra. And if you have an understanding that doesn't, you got the wrong understanding. It has to align with that one. So that's 1.338. Really important one. 1.328. Okay, so we have some topics to discuss. Excuse us when we get our technology working. Are we good?
Hey, Hare Krishna.
Okay, we're good.
That follow up on that Paribhasha Sutra is in Ishopanishad also, the Ishavasyam Idam Sarvam is like that. Guru Maharaj, is that right? The first shloka, which is the Paribhasha for the whole Ishopanishad.
I'm not certain. It might be the invocation verse.
Invocation verse. Okay. I don't know who is this Prabhu. It just says VC on the name. All things stem from hearing. Agreed. But can hearing be made more effective with individual work on oneself, namely pranayama, selfless work, karma yoga, deeper meditation techniques?
It depends. To the degree that anything, just like go back to the very first question and the very first answer to the first question, to the degree that it leads to undivided devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the answer is yes. However, to the degree that it leads to some other dependency and some other shelter than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then it's a distraction. Everything, this is the palena pariciyate. Everything is determined by the pala, by the fruit. So the determining response is, does it lead to undivided devotional service to the personality of God? It could lead to divided devotional service. I got my faith over here in this boat, and I got my faith over there in that boat, and I'm trying to cross the river. And you may end up in the river instead of crossing the river. So if there's a dependency upon those things, then it's divided. And if it leads to singular devotional service, then the answer is yes.
As a follow-up question on that, what's the process of getting nama Nama Diksha. And he says his name is Hari. I know Maharaj from Vizag, I think Vishakhapatnam
Yeah.
in India.
Okay, so
What's the process of getting Nama Diksha?
the process of getting Nama Diksha is Nama. And that what that means is by engaging in preparing oneself through purity that comes from chanting the name, then one becomes qualified or eligible. Then there's some procedures within ISKCON that, any organization will have its procedures, but the procedures are driven by principle. And the principle is take the instruction of Bhagavad Gita as given by the teachers of Bhagavad Gita and live by them. And then one becomes filled with some faith in the teachings and the teachers, and then one may seek the shelter of a particular teacher, and in requesting shelter and guidance in the process of bhakti and receiving diksha and the chanting of the holy name. That's, you can take that and fill out in more details than that, but that's the essential principle. Okay.
Question from Sri Hari Prabhu. You mentioned when Krishna appears, he will take people with pure goodness back. What is the difference between goodness and pure goodness?
Okay. We discussed this at length recently. In relation to Brahma Vimohan Lila, but the principle goes like this, quite simple. In the material world, there's three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And each of, according to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, each of the three modes has a mixture of the other two. So even people that are ignorant or influenced by ignorance, there's some passion, some goodness, and so forth. So the mode of goodness is where goodness is prominent, but there's some passion and ignorance. That's the mode of goodness. And pure goodness is there's no ignorance and passion. There's no mix. No passion, no ignorance, and the symptoms of those, passion and ignorance, are absent. So that's the position of Krishna. And those who become attached to Krishna become endowed with that same quality beyond the modes of nature. Passion and ignorance, which means also beyond the mode of goodness into this pure goodness position. Pure goodness means without ignorance and passion, even a tinge, not a trace, not a speck at any point in time, because of full connection with Krishna. High voltage. Yes.
Question from Sridhar Das. What does it mean by one sees the self as master? In the verse, Canto 1, Chapter 2, 21.
I mentioned it, and I don't mind repeating it. There's S with a self with a small s and S with a capital S. And this is written with a small s, but it implies with the capital S. So what do I mean by that? To know who you are, supposing I just think I'm spirit, that's incomplete because I'm part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit. That's what spirit is. It's a spark of a big fire. It's part of a big whole. So self as master implies Krishna as master, and I'm his tiny part of Krishna, and he's the master. That's the self as master. Krishna consciousness, that's what it means.
Question from Satish Prabhu. Is chanting before Nam Diksha as effective?
Is that you asking this question? No, some other. Okay.
Satish.
Okay. Okay.
Is chanting before Nam Diksha as effective as after Diksha?
Well, what Prabhupada explains is when Nam Diksha occurs, the full benefit of chanting Nama is accessed. So, can one achieve the full benefit of chanting the holy name without Nama Diksha? Well, the answer is if you're Shukadev Goswami, sure. And for the rest of us that aren't on that platform, no. We need this, formal spiritual connection with the cyclic succession to get the full effect.
Question from Venu Prabhu. Is it mentioned anywhere on what Srila Prabhupada saw in Boston Harbor that made him feel so overwhelmed?
Well, knowledge. I mean, it's not like he someone who's on the platform as Srila Prabhupada can see things that the rest of us can't see. So it's not like he saw, some particular scene or event. He saw the modes of nature manifest and understood it. No, it's not like he's from Calcutta, so he knew what, and his pharmacy was in, other big cities and so on. He traveled in Bombay and, city life in India. However, he saw, this is America, and he saw not necessarily a particular scene, but he saw the modes of nature are abundantly guiding and directing the activities of this nation. So that's what he saw, and was feeling a little overwhelmed at the task.
Question from Sri Jiva. What does Bhagavad Gita mean? What does Srimad Bhagavatam mean?
How old is Sri Jiva?
Sri Radhika Mataji.
I know, but I'm looking at these boys here, and so that they're picking up on. Sri Jiva is probably your age. No, his younger brother. How old are you? 6 or 7? How old? Almost 7. So Sri Jiva is probably around the same age. The younger of the two boys. About your age. Maybe about, anyway, close. So you get the picture. This is somebody your age asking this question. Oh. Oh.
He's 6, Guru.
Huh?
He's 6.
He's
6.
So you're 6. He's your age. The boy that's asking this question is your age. Oh. Okay. What does it mean? Or what is it?
What does it mean?
What does it mean? Well, Bhagavad Gita means song of Bhagavan. Gita is a word that means singing. So it's the song of God. Bhagavan doesn't just mean God, it's the possessor of all spiritual opulences in full. Everything is within Bhagavan, and he's going to speak. But when he speaks, he sings. It's said that in the spiritual world, all walking is dancing, and all speaking is singing. I mean, they're having a good time in the spiritual world. They don't just go out for a walk. They go out dancing. um, and joyful, in other words. So it's Krishna's words spoken, and so it's Bhagavad Gita. Krishna speaking. He's disclosing what the spiritual reality is. He is explaining things of this world. He is explaining things of his world. He is explaining the connection between them. He is explaining who he is. And he's explaining how the whole puzzle fits together and how to make that connection with him in all the things that we do. That's what Bhagavad Gita means. And Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad means beautiful. And Bhagavatam, or Bhagavat, is in relation to Bhagavan. Srimad Bhagavatam is the topics that are in relation to Bhagavan, and they're all very beautiful and comprehensive. That's Srimad Bhagavatam. That's what it means. Okay. Anyone else wants to discuss something? We're good. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki? Jai.